Voilà. Alors, bonjour à toutes et à tous, et puis merci pour votre venue pour ce dernier webinaire de cette série sur l'exil ukrainien et au-delà, qui se termine pour cette année universitaire. Hein. On dira quelques mots pour la suite à la fin de ce webinaire. Voilà, alors aujourd'hui, j'ai le plaisir de recevoir Basak Yavcan et Kartika Hersheid, Kartika est étudiante en master à Paris School of Economics. Basak vient d'intégrer un nouveau poste de senior researcher analyst. I don't remember exactly the title of your
head of research, senior, yeah. It doesn't matter.
Au Migration Policy Group à Bruxelles. Voilà. Alors aujourd'hui, on va porter la focale sur le programme Core-RF et puis plus particulièrement sur l'enquête longitudinale que nous avons réalisée avec Kantar, hein, une enquête qui n'est pas encore tout à fait terminée puisqu'on a réalisé 4 vagues d'enquêtes sur un total de 6, Basak et Kartika vont nous présenter les premiers résultats préliminaires de cette enquête. Voilà, donc Basak et Kartika vont parler pendant une trentaine de minutes et puis ensuite, ou 30-35 minutes, voilà, en fonction. Et puis ensuite, nous aurons une série de questions. Voilà, right. So, cette session sera en anglais, donc je vais passer à l'anglais maintenant. So Basak and Kartika, the floor is yours. I don't know if you have decided who's starting to present. No? Kartika, would you like to start?
Yes, I can start.
Right.
Let me share my
you're
screen.
already your co-host, so you can share your screen if you have a PowerPoint.
Yes.
And if there is anything I missed while I was presenting you, please.
Yes, of course.
Compliment.
Thank you. Okay. Hello, everyone. I am Kartika Hersheid. I'm a master's student at Paris School of Economics, and I am participating in this research as a part of my master thesis. So I'm writing my master thesis on Ukrainian refugees in Europe, focusing on information frictions and the take-up of social assistance. So a little bit of an introduction. So as we know, from February 2022, a lot of Ukrainian refugees have been displaced throughout Europe, and they've mainly been fleeing to neighboring countries, of which a lot of them have been displaced in Poland. And this population is characterized very differently from other displaced populations that Europe has been dealing with. And so because this has been going on for quite some time, and because this refugee population is very different from other populations that we've been dealing with, there is a need for more longer-term and suitable policies to help these populations. The temporary protection directive gives access to all publicly provided services by the state that the refugees are residing. So this includes healthcare, childcare, and also access to the labor market. But the question is if all Ukrainians are aware of these rights. So looking at the data from Kantar. So in wave 1, we see that there seems to be a difficulty in taking up social assistance by refugees. So multiple questions have been asked on what challenging situations Ukrainians face, and also what kind of services they were satisfied with or not. So 53% of these respondents responded that they faced a challenging financial situation, and also around 1 out of 4 answered that they were struggling to understand registration procedures in their host country. Furthermore, 3 out of 4 refugees answered that they were registered under the temporary protection, but less than half of them received or had the main source to be financial support of the country of residence. So what we see here is that a lot of these refugees face a challenging financial situation. However, there does not seem to be a very large take-up of financial support. So I wanted to investigate what causes, or like what is the source of this discrepancy between a challenging financial situation and the non-take-up of financial support, even though this is available for these refugees. So I'm using the longitudinal data that is collected on the individual level by Kantar, and I'm focusing on displaced Ukrainians in Europe. So mainly I focus on 5 countries, so Germany, Poland, France, Belgium, and Czech Republic. I focus mainly on these countries because here we have the largest pool of respondents. So we have the largest power to say something about this. And these countries also have very different situations in terms of, for example, language barriers or other cultural differences. So what I'm doing is I'm employing an information intervention, which is embedded in the survey wave. So I've included this in the 4th survey wave. And I am mainly focusing on financial assistance. So there are several reasons why I chose to focus on this. So firstly, it is a universal need. This is, for example, not the case in healthcare because people need different kinds of healthcare. And so this is the kind of best universal measure. And we also had the questions in the first wave that actually indicated that financial assistance is a big challenge for these refugees, and there's not a large take-up on this either. So the outcome variables that I will measure in wave 4 and in wave 5, so I will employ 2 waves. In wave 4, I have included this information intervention, and right after supplying this information, I have included some questions on ease and satisfaction of take-up of financial services. And this way we can see how this information intervention affect the immediate responses. And in wave 5, I want to ask my main question. So does the information intervention actually affect take-up or interaction with looking at social assistance and whether they are eligible? So the contribution of this research is that I'm using the individual level data, which complements the available macro data that is available on these displaced Ukrainians. And we can also identify what are the actual barriers to take up. And in this way, this maps the needs to construct longer term policies. And this also adds to the literature on integration frictions faced by refugees. So previous literature has already studied the incomplete take-up of social assistance, and there's 2 main channels that are largely discussed. So we have a stigma channel and an informational channel, and these are often hard to disentangle because the stigma channel, it goes through variables that we cannot necessarily observe. And we want to focus on the informational channel because these are actually changes that we can observe. I also assume that the stigma channel is not a big factor in the take-up of financial assistance, since it is in a way a universal need for refugees. So because these two are hard to isolate, so the informational channel is hard to isolate, we are in need of an experimental setting, which is why I am employing this information intervention. And this is also done in previous literature, for example, in looking at the take-up of food stamps and the earned income tax credit program in the US, and also in healthcare assistance. So generally, we see positive results of information supply on take-up rates or application rates. However, these results are quite heterogeneous as different populations are studied, and also information supply is supplied in a different way in each study. So I've also constructed my information intervention based on the evidence which seemed to be the most impactful. So what's also shown is that the source of information seems to play a role. So this means that Ukrainians, or like populations that already have networks, they may have already an information source. They may already be familiar with rules or application procedures in the host country. And so this may be a substitute to actual other information channels. And so this is also why I'm controlling for the source of information in my analysis. So the data is longitudinal data. It's Europe-wide, and the collection is through mainly Facebook and Instagram ads. So this started, the first wave started last year. So this was collected from the 14th of June till the 12th of July, 2022. And then there was a gap between the first and the second wave. So from 25th of September onwards, the second wave was collected. So collection is done every 2 months, more or less. And there's already 4 waves completed, and the 5th wave is now being, in the process of being sent out. So in the 4th wave, we have observations around 1,500 observations. The data also is a representative sample of the displaced population across Europe. So now the methodology that I'm using. So as I said, I'm doing an information intervention in wave 4 in 5 countries. So in these 5 countries, I am supplying information on the financial assistance that is available in these 5 countries. So the structure that I'm using is the same for all 5 paragraphs. So I am supplying information on the eligibility of the financial assistance. Then I explicitly state that one has to register for temporary protection to receive this aid. And I also supply information on estimates of how much money they may receive, and a link to more information on the official government website. So I also employ a staggered design. So in the 4th wave, I show this information intervention to half of the respondents. And then in the next wave, in wave 5, I will show it to all the respondents. And then after the information intervention, I asked 2 questions on the satisfaction to access of financial services in the host country. So this question states, how satisfied are you with the access to financial services in the host country, ranging from very unsatisfied to very satisfied, and ease to access to financial services. So this question states how easy do you find it to access financial services in your host country, which ranges from very easy to very difficult. And these questions will serve as an indication whether perceived barriers also play a role in the actual take-up of financial services. So basically these questions kind of may make it more clear in my analysis for the fifth wave and looking at the actual take-up, whether these perceived barriers, so for example, if one finds it very easy or is very satisfied with financial services, with the access of financial services, do they also actually apply to these services or not? Here you can see my control and the treatment group. So this are the observables that I have included in my analysis. This is data across countries. So for all the 5 countries pooled, we see that in the control and the treatment group, we have approximately the same amount of respondents. And we also see that on none of these categories, there is any significant differences between the control and the treatment group, meaning that it's safe to assume that both of these groups are comparable. So I am focusing on a cross-country analysis, mainly because of sample size restrictions. So I am able to do a within-country analysis for Poland and Germany, but for 3 countries, the sample size is below 100. So it's very hard to draw any conclusions on the results of within these countries. So the model that I'm employing is an ordered logit, and I'm controlling for marital status, age, gender, current activity being whether one is employed or not, or doing housework, etc. The education level, so whether one has a university degree or not. The main source of information, so where one gets this information from, is this, for example, the social media, regular media, or networks. And I'm also including country fixed effects. Then in wave 5, I include questions on take-up. So these questions assess whether respondents have taken any active steps to apply. So this asks whether respondents have taken any active steps to apply between the last wave, so wave 4 and wave 5. And if so, whether they were successful or not, and why they were not successful. So maybe because of eligibility issues, because of maybe they moved. So various reasons are stated. And also we included the information paragraph for everyone, and this is shown at the end of the survey wave. And this way we can also see, since in wave 4, the information was supplied within the survey, and in wave 5, it is supplied after the survey. We can see whether maybe the placement would also increase the salience of this information and may also make it more likely for respondents to interact with this information. And then also subsequently has any positive impact on take-up. And I will also see whether the previous answers, how they interact with the take-up rate or like the answers on these questions on Take Up in Wave 5. So the preliminary results, they're still in progress, but we see that the cross-country analysis does point to a lower odds for the treatment group to answer negatively to the questions on ease and satisfaction of take-up of financial assistance. So this means that, well, they are less likely to respond that it is difficult to take up financial assistance, and that it is and they're more satisfied with the financial assistance provided. So it seems that the perceived barriers to financial assistance are lowered by disinformation interventions, and we will see in the next wave whether this has actual implications on take-up. And for the within-country analysis, we see similar results for Poland, but for Germany and for the rest of the countries, there is no significant effect of the information intervention. This can also be an issue of the limited sample size. So that was my presentation. So if there's any questions or comments, they're very welcome.
Thank you, Kartika. I think we can directly move to Basak's presentation, and then we'll do this general discussion at the end.
Yes,
Basak,
sounds good.
maybe you can stop sharing your screen. Basak, do you have any PowerPoint or something? Yeah. So I think you already are our co-host, so you can share your screen.
Yep. You can see it, right?
Indeed.
All right, great. Sorry about that. Just give me a minute. All right. Thank you, Kartika, for this introduction. You actually introduced the survey a bit too, and you're saving me a lot of time because of that. Thanks a lot. And thank you all for joining us today. So we were, as Thomas said in the beginning, we were trying to do best out of the survey that we have access, and we actually managed to propose and get some of our questions included. And we were interested in different parts of the beast, so in my case, because I've been working on integration for a very long time and migration flows, I was mainly interested in how integration and migration flows are related. I will get to that more in detail, but basically, so I can just skip this. I was mainly interested in understanding, there is this general perception or misperception, especially in the policy circles, that if you do make any integration policies, that means that people are going to stay there and they're not going to go back. But the reality is farther from this, and there's actually a lot of variation across the people. And when we look at the literature, it is actually the case that integration expands the options for an individual. So the individual can have various aspirations and pursue them. It doesn't have to be one way or another, whereas lack thereof kind of limits those options. But it doesn't mean that there is a direct negative correlation between being integrated or feeling integrated and wanting to go back or not wanting to go back, however you put it. So just to give you, I will start by giving you some descriptive data from the survey, from the different waves, because it has, as Kartika has explained, it has been conducted across different waves, and also share with you some data across different waves. And I'll basically put the spotlight on the questions on return and on the questions on integration. It is also important at this point to note that even though Ukrainians are given the temporary protection status across the board pretty much, it doesn't mean that they are benefiting from the same integration policies, same policies in general in terms of their access to rights. Especially in the cases of many Central and Eastern European countries, especially in Poland and Romania. Actually, their access to education or employment, formal employment, remains rather low. And this is, for policymakers, this is explained by the fact that, well, Ukraine wants them back, so we don't want to be an obstacle to this by integrating them. But it looks like this is also an excuse for not promoting these policies. And at the end of the day, no one asks the people, but it is decided somehow, or it looks like it's decided at the policymaker level. But I think this survey is a great opportunity to see how people feel and what they want to do. So in terms of the demographics, it's clearly we're talking about very feminized migration with the majority of 85% of the respondents being women, and the age distribution is also rather balanced, I would say. Middle age, even young to middle age are highly represented. I wouldn't say that there are super many people under the age of 18 or over the age of 55. But what we can clearly see is it's a rather educated sample, and the marital status is also varying with some single people, married people, divorced people, or those living as partners. So the first question that we asked, and we trying to understand why people left their homes, what instigated migration, what were the push factors, of course, as expected, and in many cases of conflict, similar to them, and the fear for the lives and health of themselves and their children are the main reasons for people. They were unable to live their usual lives, and there were direct military attacks, all of which reflect on the survey, so their responses to the Kantar survey. We also asked them about their support network, so to say, or their dependencies, who they are with, and they are with, the majority are with their children. Some very small minority with partners and spouse, some with grandchildren, very small group alone. And this is also a nice comparison, I think, with other refugee groups that we see in many countries across Europe. I like that Kantar has this answer category with pets. That's kind of cute. But the category with children also is important in that it can be both. First of all, it shows that access to education is an important priority for these people, but at the same time, they have, it's not an easy path for them to integrate into the labor market. So they have to take care of the childcare situation. And we were discussing this with Thomas recently, and that results in very unexpected outcomes, because the lack of getting this provided for creates situations where women, where you would expect them to be most integrated, very well educated into the labor market, do not end up being so. So that is also something we should all take a look deeper into. And also another variable related to diaspora, the network, and eventually to return as family members in Ukraine. And you can see that apart from only 10%, everybody has family members in Ukraine. 40% have both of their parents in Ukraine, 25% have their partner or spouse, 20% have still their children, and 32% brothers or sisters or other family members. So I'm showing some of this demographic data also to illustrate that the representativeness of the Kantar data. It is actually being checked against the UNHCR records of Ukrainian refugees. And we can confidently say that even though it is collected over social media platforms, both in terms of the demographic characteristics and in terms of country and origin and destination, this is actually a rather representative data. So when we use this data, what we derive from this data is quite generalizable. So this is about their current location. As expected, 66%. I mean, the majority are in Poland. So the of the respondents. So we have asked them about their preferred location, if they are in their preferred destination or if they wanted to migrate further. And for 66%, they are where they are and they want to stay where they are. But about 30%, 31% is interested in further migrating. So they're still unsure if they have reached their final destination. So here I have a little comparative table about return intentions. We have asked a general question whether or not people are intending to go back, and then we followed it up with specific questions, you know, and what's the time frame, when do you want to return, or have you made any preparations, just to make sure that what they mean by return is actually something tangible. Because in the literature we see that there is a lot of discrepancy between aspirations, migration aspirations, and migration capabilities, and eventual migration outcomes. As you can see, about 50, well, these are the different waves. The first one is the second wave, and the last one is the fourth wave. There are about, I believe, about 9 months, right, Thomas, between the two waves. And already you can see that those who intend to go back at some point have actually dropped from 57% to 52%, which is quite expected. And even 9 months, we can see this difference. I would like to remind you that this is a longitudinal survey. So many of these are the same people, essentially, who have changed their minds. So, I intend to go back very soon has increased just a little bit. But what we see is also, I mean, reflecting the going back intentions. The 8% of the people who do not intend to go back and plan to settle outside of Ukraine. For sure, back in September was only 8%, and that increased to 15%. This is rather expected as people spend more time abroad. They start working, they start building a new life for themselves, for their families, and we see that even for Ukraine, where return is quite a viable and positive, I mean, a real prospect, this is the case. The reason I'm underlying is because in many of these conflict situations, such as in Syria, it is really not an option for people to return because it is a hostile government to these refugees. But in this case, it is not a hostile government in Ukraine, at least at the moment. And even then, we see that the return intentions are going down. Yeah, and we are yet to see how the future waves will change this finding. So possible research questions that we have as a group, we would like to answer in our research is: what are the migratory trajectories, future migration, determinants of current attitudes and behavior? As Kartika has indicated, the labor market integration, sorry, the access to services, but also we're interested in labor market integration dynamics, and as well as return intentions and integration. So I would like to just briefly touch upon the literature on evidence of integration and return nexus. As I said, there is a common perception that an inclusive integration policy is incompatible with voluntary return, as the integrated asylum seeker is not expected to prefer voluntary repatriation. But despite this common perception, the literature that looks at this issue and the several empirical analysis, both looking at surveys but also actual returns, show that it's a more nuanced picture. And neoclassical migration theory argues that failure to integrate at the destination leads to return. That is the classical assumption, but the new economics of labor migration sees return migration as the logical stage after migrants have earned sufficient assets and knowledge and to invest in their origin countries. As a result of the projected return is more likely to be referred for sustained or indefinite periods if integration is unsuccessful. So here, this brings us to another literature which is on sustainable return. So the sustainable return guys do not care about whether or not an individual has returned, because they are wary of the situation where a lot of these returnees try to migrate again when they see that their right conditions are not met back at home. So what is important, and in many cases of so-called voluntary return, where return is not exactly voluntary, this is what happens. People migrate again, even though they return initially. So it is also important that upon return, they are reintegrated into their surroundings. And it is therefore very important that at their destination, they're not isolated from the community. They're not isolated from productive activities. They're not isolated from education. There is an abundance of global evidence on this, Afghan refugees, Angolan refugees in Zambia, Moroccans, and Netherlands, where the level of integration, especially of economic and structural kind of integration, does not have any impact on refugees' intentions for return. But clearly learning the language, creating more of a network, feeling culturally very similar at some point, cultural adaptation, are correlated with more intentions of staying rather than return. But purely economic integration is not necessarily, does not really reflect on return. So what I have done was I tried to see whether or not this is supported by the data, and this will be scratching the surface. I have also found similar evidence from Syrian, with my research with Syrian refugees in Turkey. Those who elicited higher belonging to Turkish identity with better Turkish language skills were less interested in return in my surveys, but also those who are more educated and have higher income were not necessarily less interested in return. And those who are most likely to return or ended up returning were the ones with lasting familiar ties in Syria, with family return being an important reason for return, as well as those who complained about discrimination. So when we were to look at the languages then being spoken, so the usual suspects of where Ukrainian stands, so this is the languages they speak. So clearly in terms of their destination countries, many do not speak the languages of the destination countries. Again, this needs to be also looked at different ways. But this was the middle wave, I believe. So we have only 31% speaking English and 14% speaking Polish, very small, 4% and 3% and 3% speaking German, French, and Spanish, respectively. We also asked them how they support themselves. So here are the results. 42% get support from the authorities of the country they're at, and 39% with their own savings, 31% income from work, 24% support from family and friends, support from NGOs is 10%, they borrow money, also about 5% did that. And when we asked about the return intentions, Here, what I did was I tried to see the average of intentions of return. This was wave 3 again. And I put the countries where the return intentions were considerably higher, I mean, visibly at least higher than this average. So not around average or just above or below average, but meaningfully higher or lower. So you can see in Croatia, Cyprus, Romania, Latvia, and Italy, the return intentions are higher, visibly higher than the average. And in Belgium, Netherlands, Norway, Sweden, and Finland, they are visibly lower than the average. So we asked them also, as I indicated, a set of questions related to return and why they were interested in return. And the majority wanted to, for the majority, the reason was education, either for themselves or for their children, followed by homesickness. Again, the network is important, the diaspora is important, reuniting with spouse or relatives, or lack of funds for living abroad were the other most important reasons for these people. Okay, I said that I'm interested in what's going on with integration and return. We asked them their perceived level of integration, which is a general question, not specifically looking at the labor market dynamics or cultural dynamics. And the majority feels moderately integrated, and very small minority feels very well integrated, about 4.8, about 5%, and 12% feel integrated, and still about 35% felt not integrated, 36% even. So then, as I said, I'm interested in the relationship between return intentions and perceived integration. So we had this question on whether or not they intend to go back soon that I showed you in the beginning. And I've indicated that there was some drop in the intentions of return. So this is perceived integration. 5 means high integration, 1 means low integration. And here are the different answers given to the question on return. To cut the story short, I can summarize the data for you. There isn't really much of a very meaningful relationship. And first of all, feeling integrated does not lead to wanting to return less. As a matter of the fact, if I try to take out the don't know answers and prefer not the answer and looked at between these 3 categories and the perceived integration, there even seems to be, I mean, really, there is no relationship, and maybe like a very small positive relationship, which is contrary to what the common understanding in the political circles would expect. So which is good in general. I like, in this case, I like the no results and the inconclusive answer. But what needs to be done is, as I said, looking at the different dimensions of integration. And one way, of course, also doing this could be looking at comparative data, looking at what these countries have done in integrating Ukrainians and whether or not they managed to open their labor market, whether or not they managed to look at the other dimensions of integration, language, etc. So a similar question that Kantar already had, we didn't change, it was asked across the waves, was adaptation, whether or not adaptation is a big challenge. So this is also a bit like an integration question, but from the negative. And as I did with the previous question on return, I took the average and listed the top countries where integration is seen as a very big challenge, and the bottom where integration is seen less of a challenge. And here is the listing: Greece, Portugal, Austria, Luxembourg, Spain, and Italy are the countries where adaptation is seen as a very big challenge as compared to Estonia, Malta, Latvia, Croatia, Bulgaria, Finland, and Iceland, where it has seen less of a challenge. I also have a question on satisfaction with services. Here, this is something that can play into it, because also they're one of the reasons where they pick why they pick the country they're at. When we ask them about this, is the services provided to them, so this seems quite related to migration trajectories. And here the high satisfaction countries are Ireland, Norway, Luxembourg, Switzerland, and Estonia. And Bulgaria, other European countries, Greece, Hungary, and Malta are other places that people are less satisfied with the services provided to them. So I'll stop it here. As I said, this is just, scratching the surface, preliminary analysis. And I look forward to your feedback as to what else to look at on this, and how I can incorporate additional dimensions to answer this dichotomy. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Basak. Yeah, so thanks a lot. It's while I was hearing you, I was thinking that maybe you should have started the presentation, and then Kartika would have complemented with her own intervention. But it's anyway.
Okay.
Both dovetail very well. Kartika, you did a very interesting exercise. This intervention, which shows that the level of satisfaction of depends also of the level of information. That's pretty much what your experience is showing. And Basak, thank you for this overview. One of the things that struck me is that finally the reason to return is not so much related to the intent to reunite with a spouse, which is a bit surprising, given there are 90% of women and most of them with children. Actually, reuniting with a spouse is not something which is. So it could be interesting to see why. Is it because they feel they have, I don't know, have reconsidered the way the couple function, or I don't know. Or maybe they are happy with the transnational form of family, or I don't know. It's something we should inquire in the qualitative research. So, is there any question in the audience of the? Not yet. Please raise your hand if you have any. Yeah. Okay. Okay, Karim.
Okay. Thank you very much for these two presentations. Very interesting. Yeah, I have a very short question, because you talked a lot about the intention of return. But what about the effective returns? Because we are surprising when discussing with the Ukrainian refugees here in France that we meet, that many of them return quite early, like in July last summer, or for Christmas in December last year. Some of them we can see are returning and coming back to France and going back to Ukraine another time. So we're a bit surprised by all these travels, actually. So you didn't mention that fact. Do you have data on that?
What we have data on actually those who have returned. The only problem with that is that it is not a very big sample. That doesn't allow us to do lots of generalization and good analysis. But that's one benefit of, we are hoping to complement it also with this kind of data. So Kantar does survey people who have returned, but again, it is a fluid process. Those who have returned may have migrated again, or may migrate again for another wave. I think down the road, when we know we're getting to the end of the survey here, end of the waves, I think we should ask a question also reflecting on your question, on your concern, with looking back and asking them about, you know, their previous return, whether or not they return, how many times they return, or when was the time when they stopped thinking about return. All of these things should be asked about. Also considering this is the panel data, we should make a better use of it. I think that's your question gave me a great idea. Thanks for that.
Yeah, I think that there is at some point a question on the back and forth movement, and there is a question about did you return in Ukraine last month, last 2 months, or 3 months? I don't remember. But yeah, there are so many of them. We are not done with the analysis. So yeah. But if I remember from other sources, from France, I heard someone in Strasbourg was saying that they estimate that around 20% of the Ukrainians had gone back over the summer for during the holiday period. So it's relatively important. Catherine?
Hello, and thank you very much for this very interesting presentation. And I'm especially interested in that question of return. And also, I was wondering whether this possibility of going back and forth, which is really, I'm observing it here from Germany, not in a scientific way, but just more in an activist way. But it's really something one sees a lot. And I have a second, and well, that's an observation. And I have a question about the problem of, I don't know how to say it in English, la scolarisation des enfants, the fact that you have so many mothers with children, and the children often go to school in the countries, at least in Germany here, they are scholarized in German system. And so this might also have an impact on going back. I had the feeling that it was a huge issue for them, keep them in the Ukrainian system since it's possible, let them go to school and completely integrate them in the school system of the host country. And that maybe also the decision to go back or not depends on that. What do you do with your child? Can you take a child again out of a new school system? And yeah.
So apparently, because of this, many of the students are following the Ukrainian education system, especially in the neighboring countries of Poland and Romania, from what I can gather, distancia, like from distance. And but at the same time, this prevents them from integrating into the local education system, and it makes it easy for the policymakers in these countries to ignore this issue, ignore this topic. So I don't know what would be a solution to this problem, but I think we are coming to the limits of this distant education, and also families have to reconsider in Ukraine. I mean, even if Ukraine wants these people back, it is that the people who decide what to do at the end of the day. And if they want them back, they can provide some reintegration courses for the students when they come back, or if they can work with the ministers of national education, and at least of the neighboring countries, to somehow create a cohesive curriculum, and just have a couple catch-up courses upon return for these kids. So I think this kind of duality is problematic, and kids being outside of school and being in distant education also reflects on parents, mothers in particular, economic integration, labor market integration. So.
Yeah, indeed, and the policies put in place by the states, the different states, they say something about how they want to what they want to do with the integration of the Ukrainians. I mean, France has done a particular effort in hiring teachers fluent in Ukrainian or Russian. I don't remember the exact figure. It was something around 1,000 people they hired. While in Poland, they try to encourage the pupils to stay at home and to do the teaching online and the online courses, just like during the COVID period. So there is a marked will by the French government to integrate incorporate the children into the school system, which is not at all the case in Poland. So yeah, marked differences.
But I think this would be very interesting to measure the effect on going back, because I think it has an effect very clearly. And maybe at the beginning, there might have been a strategy that might change also over the course of time, which is something I observe here. You see children that really don't want to learn German. And then after a while, you see that the prospects of the family just changed because they just realized they can't go back. And then the children change their attitude and start really learning German because they know it's unescapable. So I have the feeling there is a very strong connection between both. And,
of course,
Access, I think this is something we need to look deeper into, access to education and return. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But at the same time, you need to counterbalance it with the with integration into the job markets, because in Poland, 45% of the respondents say they have a job, whereas it's only 15% in Germany. So I don't know about France, but there is a huge difference between the countries as well. Apparently, one of the reasons why it is so low in Germany is that a lot of the Ukrainians have a diploma, a degree, and which is not recognized in Germany, whereas it's most flexible in Poland. Also, I suppose the language barrier is important.
And Catherine, do you think we should ask something beyond access to education here? Like not, maybe you're suggesting that we should, because we can. Currently, we're asking whether or not the kids have access to education in these countries or they can go to school there. But do you think we should ask something additional?
Honestly, I don't know really how to formulate it, and because I think it's how do you say, it's circular thing.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's certainly very difficult to grasp only through a question. Since it's not only, maybe the obligation also, as Thomas said, some countries where you have to put your child to school. And so after 1.5 years, you have a child that starts really speaking well the language, feeling at home and having perspective, maybe something like that. I'm not very clear myself about how this plays, because it plays in both directions.
I think this is also something for the qualitative section to also complement our data. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, Karine?
Yeah, I had a question on the remark you made about the jobs and the percentage of refugees working in Poland compared to Germany. And I wanted to know if you have qualitative data about which kind of job they have.
No, not yet. No.
Okay.
Especially in these two countries. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a very good question, and especially for Poland, probably less with a lower
low skill.
Lower skill. Yeah, because the Ukrainians before the war in Poland were mostly in unskilled jobs in Poland. As far as
I think also formalization is a dimension that we should look into on this. You know, if those are formal jobs or informal jobs.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Olga.
Yeah, thank you very much for this very interesting presentation, both. of presentations. And I have a question also about the distance education. I wonder if this distant education is a very specific feature of this Ukrainian exile compared to others exiles. Is it something very specific for Ukrainians, because the context of this war is particular, or it's something that you observe for other exiles?
Yeah.
I think it is a bit more specific to Ukrainian exiles, and the most similar example I can give you is from a context where I have most of my experience, and that's the Syrians in Turkey, and where they initially, upon arrival, across Turkey, temporary education centers have been set up for Syrians, and those would be places where Syrian instructors, teachers would teach the Syrian curriculum. And the language of instruction would be Arabic, not Turkish. And that was to make sure to provide an uninterrupted education for the kids at a time when the return intentions were very high. But shortly, in a matter of 3-4 years, Turkey phased out of these schools because it became clear that people were not returning, and there were more benefits in teaching the language properly and integrating them in the public education system to also put an end to this duality, because then you had more graduates from these temporary education centers at the high school level. Then how do they go to the university? What kind of a pathway do you provide? And that becomes a challenge. Then you have to set up some sort of an assessment procedure. Then you put these kids through some equivalence tests and things like that to place them at the university, which was a challenge also. So currently there are no more temporary education centers. So but again, I mean, in the case of Syrians, everybody believed that the conflict would be over in a matter of months, but we know this wasn't the case. And so that was something similar in terms of providing a temporary remedy based on the origin education system that I know of. But this kind of distance learning outside the classroom is I'm not aware of. I think this is like a post-COVID phenomena also.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think this is also, I mean, we have to also factor in the intentions of the Ukrainian government to have these people back. I think that to get these people back, and not everywhere we have this dynamic, and I think that also contributes to they are willing to offer these courses online, and they are willing to engage the students. So it's low cost rather from the perspective of the displaced person.
Yeah, and this online distance education is primarily targeting the Ukrainian, well, initially the Ukrainian children in Ukraine, and it's been expanded to Ukrainians abroad. But yeah, and it's been put in place in the very early weeks after the war. It's been very extremely rapid. Any other question? No?
Maybe I think you said something very interesting about one variable, which is the will of the governments or of the states to get those people back. I just realized when you were talking that there is a huge difference, I guess. Like Ukraine really wants them back. It's a huge, how do you say, stake. And I guess like Syria or in many countries, they're just very happy to be rid of the people who are going. So, well, not at all, not in all, and depending also on the situation. If it's war, civil war, or just working migrations, but that's also an interesting variable, I think, to study.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, I mean, but that can also change if not the right side wins the war, right? So, and because in the case of, say, Syria, that was the case. The right side didn't win. So the people, the exiles, it makes more sense for them to not to go back. So, yeah.
Maybe you can also explain the difference of treatment with the Belarusian exilees. Something maybe Agnieszka and Ronan are working on them. So probably compares with the other Eastern governments, Eastern European governments, and there are different policies. Right. Okay, no other question? So thank you very much, Basak and Kartika. It's been a pleasure. Right, so this webinar is coming to an end. As I mentioned earlier, it's being recorded, so you can find the recordings on the YouTube channel of the Institut Convergence Migration. If you missed the previous episode, and also if you want to share the news to people who have been interested, who would have been interested to attend but could not, or was not aware of this webinar series, you feel free to share the news. Right. So as I mentioned, also we are starting again next year in September, but with Ronan Hervouet, who will present his own research on the Eastern Garden diasporas, and especially the Belarusian one, with his program Exilees. Right, so we do not have the date yet, but we will keep you informed, and also about the upcoming event of the whole series in autumn. So thank you very much, everyone, and hope to see you in September. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.